So here we go. Here's an article we found on the Mary Sue regarding the film Selma. Ava DuVernay will bring Selma to every U.S. school with the Selma for Students initiative. The director is quoted as saying, "This film can do more than entertain. It can educate, it can inspire, it can empower." In addition to being entertaining, films can be powerful tools that can provoke thought, educate, and get people to see the world in a different way. This is what director Ava DuVernay thought regarding her film Selma, and it appears that Paramount Home Media agrees. With this in mind, they've launched the Selma for Students initiative, which will provide a copy of the film on DVD to every high school in the U.S., both public and private, free of charge. Teachers can download a free Selma study guide at this link here. This project started as a grassroots effort within black communities all across the country, with black business owners giving their own money to ensure that as many children as possible were able to see the film. DuVernay is pleased that Paramount is now extending that idea and putting their weight behind it so that even more students of all races can benefit from the inspiring message of Selma. Now, this is ostensibly not a bad idea. I mean, for the studio and the director to make these materials available and this property available for free to educators is not a bad thing. It's not necessarily going to, kill students to watch this movie. I'm not suggesting that there should be any kind of outrage or protest or grassroots effort to prevent this film from being screened. I certainly don't think so. I don't think it's a bad idea. But there are some things about it that I do find kind of interesting, which I'd like to just sort of point out here. Now, you can't talk about this movie without really talking about another movie, American Sniper, because when this came out, we know American Sniper was out, and there was a bit of a tussle between the various groups supporting these two movies, if you remember when this came out. Now, American Sniper, as we know, was widely panned and disregarded by, shall we call them, the liberal self-righteous left. They did not like American Sniper. They hated American Sniper because American Sniper was everything that they hate about, the Iraq War and American foreign policy and anything like that. It had patriotism. It had, a positive portrayal of a American soldier, and they really didn't like that. But, maybe that's not really what they didn't like. Because if you look at this, here we go, Box Office Mojo. Selma, domestic total gross was $52,076,908. Production budget was $20 million. It was nominated for an Oscar. Nominated for 2 Oscars, won 1 for original song, so it didn't win the big prizes. But if you contrast that with American Sniper, domestic total was $347 million, almost $348 million. It was nominated for 6 Oscars and won 1 for sound editing. So, it didn't really win any of the main Oscar prizes. And I think there was another thing going on there. As we recall, the left was very upset that American Sniper might win some of the bigger Oscar awards, and they were upset that, Selma was quote-unquote snubbed. But even that, I don't think really matters that much. I think really what the left was really, really upset about was the fact that America loved this movie. Look at this. That's just the domestic total. Look at the worldwide total, almost like over $500 million. Its first wide opening weekend, it made more than Selma did. And this really pissed them off, because this is middle America. This is normal, everyday, working class, middle class, flyover state, wrong think America. The crass, unwashed masses that the liberal elites, look down on because they think that liking something like Selma makes them a little more Well, they like to feel morally superior to these kinds of people. And the fact of the matter is, America didn't love Selma. America loved American Sniper. Because American Sniper, it was just massively popular. I mean, this movie was unstoppable. And I think that's really, really pissed them off. And you can remember some of the Twitter battles going back and forth. I'm not going to get into it, but yeah, it was a big dust up over this movie. And they weren't happy about it. So, I think that's really, it was just a knee-jerk left-wing reaction to this movie, to its more positive elements. And the arguments were that this didn't have, it wasn't factually accurate. It took liberties. And like, well, yeah, it took liberties. Of course it did. It's a Hollywood portrayal of true events. But the same argument was made for Selma, that it didn't portray some of the events necessarily completely accurately. And you know what? When I watch a Hollywood adaptation of any kind of true story, I'm not expecting factual accuracy for the most part. I'm expecting a little bit of dramatic license, a little bit of, fluffery to sort of fit it within a standard narrative so that it has a flowing plot. So that doesn't really upset me that much. Now, if you go here, this project started as a grassroots effort within black communities all across the country, so black business owners were giving their own money to screen this film. Again, this is a noble sentiment right here. I have no problem with this. But again, I have to kind of wonder, because it's like, it seems like the director and certain people, they're just determined to make you like this movie. It's like, oh, well, you didn't love the movie at the box office, you didn't want to pay to see it, well, now we're going to force your children to watch it. And again, not a bad thing, I just find it kind of funny. But with this, this is kind of, I think, where maybe the narrative is just maybe they're blinded a bit by their own insistence that this is such a transformative film. Because if the problem was that black kids couldn't afford to see this movie, well, I mean, we do have a little thing called the internet. I mean, computer use is pretty widespread now. I think a lot of people, even in poorer neighborhoods, have access to computers and some form of internet, or they have some way of getting something from the internet. So if the fact of the matter was that they couldn't afford to see this film, they probably would have just downloaded it, don't you think? Don't you think they would have just stolen it? But, well, let's go to see this. Okay, here's Selma here. This is a torrent site. Here are the torrents available for Selma. Now, the interesting thing here is there are torrents available, but the two most popular are in French, which is interesting. It's 500 seeds almost, 230. I mean, it's a somewhat healthy torrent. But those are the French versions. So obviously the kids weren't exactly killing themselves to try and see this movie. Now let's take a look at the other one. American Sniper. Movies. American Sniper. I mean, look at this. I mean, this is months later. Well, there's a French version too, and it's popular. But, I mean, there's a lot of torrents here that are very healthy. I mean, I don't know of any way to just really track torrent downloads. I think somebody was trying to do something like that, but so I just have to kind of go by the availability of the torrent. And here you can clearly see that, the kids aren't trying to download Selma. They're trying to download American Sniper. And maybe it's again, not. This is a noble sentiment. I'm not going to decry this, but I think it's somewhat misplaced because, the demographics for American Sniper are probably, kids like 18 to 24 and even older. And this movie just touched everybody. Everybody wanted to see this movie. But that's a good demographic right there. And included in that demographic, don't you think would be black youth of the same age group? And I'm willing to bet that they more readily identify with the character of Chris Kyle than they do with MLK. they more readily identify with the subject matter of American Sniper than they do with Selma. You know, these are young guys who see this movie, you know, maybe they play Call of Duty because they have a console or a PC. You know, I think this just rings truer, especially for the guys. Now, maybe for the girls, maybe not. I don't know, but I mean, this movie was obviously just so popular that it had something for everybody, right? So, is it really the fact that they couldn't afford to see it? I kind of have to question that. I think if they really wanted to see this movie, either by going to see it outright at the video, or renting. Do people even rent videos anymore? I don't think so. Or just downloading it. I mean, as you can see, Selma was just not even popular as a fucking thing to steal. You know what I mean? So, I don't know about that. You know, to me, it's just like, she's determined that this movie is going to be important. And maybe it just isn't. Maybe the subject matter is important, but maybe her actual film just isn't important. Maybe people just didn't like it. It just didn't catch on. You know, I believe in capitalism. I believe in the marketplace of ideas. And, you know, this film went out there in the marketplace and it just didn't catch on. So, you know, and actually that brings me to the next point, which is, I think it would be incredibly funny if Clint Eastwood did the same thing with his film. If who was the company behind this? I don't know. If Clint Eastwood in the studio, you know, took this movie and said, okay, well, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to offer it free to anyone who wants to learn about Chris Kyle or wants to learn about, you know, this particular piece of the Iraq War, and do the same thing. Now, could you imagine the absolute fucking Twitter shitstorm that would happen if he did this? I mean, Jesus, these people here, they would just lose their shit. They would just be writing about how terribly awful and triggering it is. I mean, recently there was a backlash against American Sniper. American Sniper derailed by Muslim complaints at University of Maryland. So this is your typical, I mean, this doesn't surprise me, this is just your typical SJW, social justice warrior, fucking complaining about American Sniper.
Like the movie, American Sniper, coming under fire.
Some UTA students are planning to protest at campus.
Yeah, of course they're going to protest it. I mean, what else do they have to do? Study for exams? Fuck no. So, I just really think that would be hilarious if Clint Eastwood just said, okay, I'm gonna do the same thing, because you could just imagine the fucking absolute shitstorm that this would cause, and then you could call them out on the left's hypocrisy. Again, not to detract from Martin Luther King, not to detract from the movie itself, not to detract from the, you know, very well-intentioned ideas of black business owners to, you know, contribute to their community and try and educate. I don't have a problem with that, but what I do have a problem with are the snarky, self-righteous, liberal twats, most of whom are white, complaining about the fact that in the marketplace of ideas, this movie was much more popular. America loved this movie. They didn't care so much for Selma, and that just irritates them. And I would like to see them be irritated even more by Clint Eastwood sort of doing the same thing. And I just think that it would be funny. Because really, when you think of the, you know, overarching character traits between Chris Kyle and Martin Luther King, I mean, they were both strong-willed characters. They were both firmly, you know, they were firm in their convictions. They believed in their causes. They were both willing to die. Both did die. You know, obviously Chris Kyle didn't die in the war. He died because he used to work with veterans with PTSD afterwards, and tragically was killed by another troubled young soldier who I believe just recently had his court case. But he believed in what he was doing. He believed in his cause, right or wrong. Martin Luther King as well. So, because you know what the left would do, they would like, well, this has no place. This is glorifying war. This is glorifying blah blah blah. It's just awful and triggering and terrible. But really, what argument would they really have? Because this is about a historical figure as well. This is about somebody who actually lived, and they just can't stand that it portrays America in sort of a positive light. I think that it really bothers them, the fact that people liked it and it was a positive portrayal of an American soldier. And I don't know what their problem is, because there's been plenty of other movies about the Iraq War that get into those kinds of questions about, was it a good war, was it a bad war, yada yada yada, was it terrible? And there's very good documentaries about it. This film wasn't about that. This film was about Chris Kyle. But they can't stand it. They can't stand to have one thing that doesn't completely coincide with their worldview. It just kills them. And it kills them that Americans are all very terrible and awful because they like this stuff. So I think it would just be you know what, sometimes you just want to watch the world burn. You know, you just want to watch the spectacle, and I think it would be fucking hilarious to do the same thing and just watch the fucking the lefties just lose their fucking shit on the internet about it, and then you can just call them out on all their hypocrisy and say, well, actually, you know, you're kind of doing the same thing with Selma. You just don't like the content. It's not the principle, it's the content you don't like. So it's okay for you, but it's not okay for them. Again, I think this is a good idea. I don't see a problem with showing this picture of thing. Why not show both, right? Why not teach kids? Why not show a plethora of films about the war, about this Selma subject, and documentaries, and let them come to their own conclusions. Let them teach them to think critically, for God's sake. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing. You know, it's... oh, come on, Clint, do it. It'd be fucking funny.